Cory, thank you so much for being here today on Drinking with Gin.
Oh, yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, can we just talk about your voice first of all? I mean, how
So
often do
sure.
people comment on how amazing your voice is? I had to start my day today with one of your meditations because
Mm,
I figured what better way to prepare for a podcast with Cory Allen than to do a Cory Allen meditation.
that's right, yeah, thank you, and how often? Every day. So yeah, every day, it is funny, even if I go to, like, grab a coffee or something, generally the person taking my order or the barista handing my coffee will say something, and, it's funny that the comments range from, "Oh, you have such a calming voice," to, "You sound like Batman," or, "You sound like whatever," and Um, yeah, so it's interesting to me. It's just I'm used to it. I don't think about it until someone says something. But um, I find it fascinating the variety of how people receive in what they hear and what it kind of symbolically arises in their minds. That's always interesting to me.
Well, I find your voice really calming. I think it's perfect for podcasting, meditation, which is great because that's what you do for a living. So it's great that that coincides. But it's probably like people that are really tall, right? Like, oh, how tall are you? Like
Hmm.
that repetitive thing. People actually make comments that my voice is soothing or
Oh
calming
yeah.
when they listen to the podcast, which I don't hear that in myself, but that's great, I guess, if that's what people take
Yeah, well, I
away.
mean, so one thing, I'm 6'3", so I'm also tall, but um, your voice is calming. It's very smooth. It's rounded on the edges. So, the timbre of it is very smooth and soft. And so I bet that's why it sounds the opposite of that would be jarring and angular and sort of like beaky, like like birds have like a crackling sort of sound to their thing versus like a bear that's like, it's like kind of one of those shapes of sound. I was a music producer for a decade as well, by the way. That's why I think about sound and shapes and stuff. But yeah, so it's relaxing. It is.
I love that. Well, thank you. That's so nice.
Mhm.
We do start every episode of Drinking with Gin with "What are you drinking?" And I did see you were sipping on something during we had a little therapy session before we started recording. So what are you sipping on as we chat today?
It's just a cup of warm honey.
Ooh, I've been having a lot of honey lately. I actually was sick a few weeks ago, and so I was having like tea with honey or like making yogurt parfaits with honey, and now I've kind of
Mm.
been on a little trend of it.
I'm just joking, by the way. I was
The
joking about it's
voice.
what's making my voice sound like that. Yeah. It is yeah, you'll soon learn that I'm a very ridiculous person. It's a cup of turmeric tea. And I have to say, if anyone's interested, there's a brand called Vadam, Vahdam, of turmeric tea. If you happen to see it, it's a very luxurious box, green box. When packaging, it is the best, the absolute best. So that's what I'm having right now.
Awesome. Well, I will check that out. I do love tea. And I was serious about the honey. I have been
Mm.
having it, but I love that. And that you got me on dry humor because I picked up on your dry humor in your book, even just on the pages. And I'm a huge dry humor person. So
Yes.
I love that you actually got me. I'm drinking a Pamplemousse La Croix.
Oh, wonderful. I love the
So
pamplemousse. That's a good
yeah.
one.
I like the
Um,
limoncello one, but I swapped it out. I had one of these in the fridge and I was like, ooh, that sounds
nice.
good today. So
Well, I was wondering if and nothing against it, but I was wondering if you're going to be having a cocktail at during the afternoon, you know?
not today.
Okay.
Not I it's so funny because the drinking with gin thing, I can tell you the story afterwards of how I named it that. And the podcast isn't about drinking at all, but we do drink something. It doesn't necessarily have to be alcohol. But yeah, the name I can't take credit for it. It actually came, what is it called? Posthumous from my dad through a
Mm.
guide. So my
Oh,
dad named the podcast actually after he passed away, which is kind of fascinating.
fascinating.
Yeah.
You ever heard about people that will have like they're on their deathbed and they'll write like a series of letters to their family members and then not they'll have like another family member not telling anyone, but then wait to send those out on the birthdays so that the year after the person passes away, you get a card from them from beyond.
I just had a friend who had a friend that did this. They wrote a letter as they were passing away to be released at a certain period after they were gone. That's wild to me. I don't think I would be able to think that far in advance. I would probably be too scared.
I think it would be. I'd be like, it's a little chilly. Uh, how are you? There's, or I don't know if you've ever seen Family Guy before, but there's one where Peter goes. I think he goes to heaven or something, and comes back, and they're like, "So what's it like?" And he's like, "There's a shortage of chairs," and everyone's like, "Huh, that's awkward."
That's hilarious. I love it. All right, I have a weird question to start.
Perfect.
Why did you say yes to this?
Because I was in a good mood. So basically, like I get a lot of podcast inquiries, pretty much on a daily basis, and I almost to 99% of them I say no. But there'll be a combination of two things has to happen. I am in a good mood, and then the if I glance at the person, whoever is making the request, and I just my something about my intuition goes like, yes, you should do that, then I do it.
I had a feeling you were going to say something about your intuition, and I'm glad you said about being in a good mood because these are all things that we're going to talk about today. I was so excited. So I've told this story to a couple of my closest friends. I haven't said or put out there yet publicly that you were coming on the podcast. I wanted to make sure it actually happened first.
Smart, very smart.
But I was like, it was such a big deal. My cleaning lady was at my house when I got the reply from you. And when I share your stuff, because I occasionally share it, the fact that you liked my share, I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. I'm just going to throw it out there into the universe. And you just never know. Like, you've had some really amazing guests and have probably had sort of a similar feeling to how I felt when you said yes. Like,
Yeah.
it was a big deal. Like, I have followed you for a long time. I look up to you as somebody that is in industries that I'm now in and newer in. And so I want to say thank you to start for being in a good mood and having some sort of a good intuitive feeling about coming on Drinking with Gin.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me, that, you know, the fact that I have even facilitated you having a level of excitement or just something meaningful for you in your professional life. I'm really, really grateful for that, and I'm happy that I said yes. And any of the work I've done publicly that has been useful, I'm very grateful for that too. And I'm bad at expressing my emotions too, so I'm trying my best to tell you how I'm feeling right now. So I hope it's all coming through. But thank you. I'm grateful that you had that experience and that you feel that way.
Yeah. And so, as much as it was about me and me being excited to get to share your work through my work, I also know how much your content resonates with me, and knowing that that will also translate to, to you that's listening right now, and, making an impact to my listeners. And I think a lot of what you do kind of backs up some of the things that I talk about too. Like, and you'll be able to do it in a more articulate manner even than
Well, we'll
because
find
you've
out.
TBD. But one of the biggest things that you talk about that really resonates with me is being present. And I wanted to share with you one of the first moments that, and we'll talk about some of the things from your books and that you've talked about. I love to hear some of your perspective. But one of the coolest, most, I guess, resonating moments where someone really made me think about being present was when I was doing yoga in Tulum overlooking the beach. And it was with this really kind of hippy dippy yoga guy, like, just, if you just picture that Tulum vibe overlooking the beach. And we were in Warrior Two. And he said, pay attention to your position right now. If you are leaning forward, you're thinking about the future. If you're leaning back, you're thinking about the past. And if you're actually like standing upright, you're in the present. And I never had really thought about it like that before, and that made sense. And you talk so much about being present, and I love your metaphors. We're going to talk about some of the metaphors that you use or I've heard you use lately. But there's such value in being present. Like, what made you start really paying attention to that and talking about that?
Let's see. I think uh, presence is interesting because it's an experience and a concept, and I think that you can experience presence without being really aware of the concept of being present. But once you become aware of the concept of it, it helps you kind of frame it in your mind, the idea, the experience a bit more, to where you can then actively move towards it and become more present in your life. Um, and I'm just making up this analogy in real time, so hope that makes sense. But so I'm thinking back, like, I was forced to focus on the present kind of as a kid without knowing any of the language around it, um, because I had to assess certain elements of my, environment whenever I was growing up, and was forced to be aware of my surroundings, of the languaging that was going on, the kind of emotional artillery that was flying around, the stories that were being told that were not cohesive with the reality that I experienced. All of those things made me go, I had a couple of insights from that have been valuable to this day. One of which is like, if I'm being told one thing about what happened, but I experienced another, that's very confusing to a young person. And so to me, my response to it was to go, I need to start paying really close attention to what's happening all the time. So that whenever later it's tried to use to, manipulate or to tell a different story about reality, I will have a very astute perception of what was occurring. And I can go, no, this isn't real. Like what I'm being told is not real. It's a protection mechanism ultimately, or was for me. That also was this planted the seed of becoming aware that my perception is subjective, which was incredibly valuable as well. Like I'm taking this reading of the world through my nervous system, and it's generating an image of what has occurred in life in my mind. And but that is simply a story. It's just like an instrument taking a reading in a laboratory. And everyone else's minds are also these instruments taking this reading about what's going on in life. But we're all experiencing slightly different things. And we're all telling ourselves these stories about what happened with our cognitive biases and so forth. And so that was a really powerful thing that came from that environment as well. But as I got older and I was continuing to be present out of kind of a protection mechanism, um, I started finding it just a useful tool to absorb as much detail about the moment as I could in any situation, even as like a teenager or something like that in life, because it told me so much more about my experience, about what was happening. It told me more about people. If I'm watching I was having dinner with a friend the other night that's the exact same, and we were laughing about how both of us are just ridiculous, where whenever we look at someone, it's not like, oh, there's a person. It's like there's a person that they have a fake expensive watch on, but actual expensive shoes. They have like a slight amount of sweat on their brow. Their chest is rising and falling a bit fast, so they're not necessarily comfortable or grounded right now. They're trying to like counter signal wealth, but they don't actually have the money to back it up. Or maybe that's a counter signal. We'll watch and see what unfolds there. Let's see their like the way that their skeleton is moving and what their posture is. So what they're trying to signal to the world through that and how they engage. Like that's just sort of how my brain does that with everything. And it's like it started there. It's like just deconstructing the immense detail of being all the time. And so at a certain point, uh, whenever I just completely randomly engage with Eastern wisdom traditions, I began teaching myself meditation. And then that concept or that experience of presence, whenever I didn't know what it was, met the concept of presence and self awareness. And they really connected because I had this experiential history with being present out of necessity. And then I found here's not the harm reduction aspect of presence. Here's the abundant aspect of presence. Here's the beautiful part of it. And I was able to kind of melt those things together. And then from there forward, I've just grown and nurtured that sense of awareness and experience and made it a very important part of my being.
Thank you for sharing all that. And because especially for me, like knowing some of your work, I'd be lying if I said I knew all of your work, but being in tune with some of it, and even just the way that you describe things, like in Now is the Way, enjoying a cup of coffee and being present with it. Like to me, the way you explain it, and maybe it's just the way that you portray it now, is about that positive experience. And
Yes.
because I am what's the word I'm looking for? I am susceptible to multitasking, or drinking my coffee while I'm checking email, while I'm getting ready for the day, and doing all of those things. So this morning, knowing that we were going to be talking, I was very conscientious about sitting with my cup of coffee and being present. And yesterday when I was having coffee with a friend, and I think it's interesting too, when you are present, you think about how that impact is when you're engaging with somebody else. You think about people that make you feel like you're the only person in the room when they're having a conversation with you. It makes a really big difference, not just for you, but for who you surround yourself with too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's wild how people can really feel that as well. And it's like most people won't register that that's what it is that's happening, but they'll feel the fact that you're actually with them in the moment, and it really does something. It's a big thing. It's kind of like one of the ways I've used to describe it is like, if you see someone can walk into if you're in the subway and someone like comes into your car, you immediately can feel like, oh, this person is freaking me out, that I'm getting this like magnetic pulse of like instability and violence or aggression or whatever coming off of them, and everyone else in the train car is noticing that too, and it's like, well, they didn't say anything, they didn't do anything, they stepped on, and everyone's antennas was like, you know, obviously we could go into what that actually is if we want, but the inverse of that is also true. Someone can walk in and be incredibly calming and open and be kind of like this oceanic, nurturing sort of judgment-free awareness, and that's an incredible feeling to feel. And once you recognize that and you learn how to bring that to conversations and connections, then everyone that you meet, they just feel that sense of like relief and safety and generally curiosity and the ability to be open because they feel all of that stuff coming off of you. So yeah, it's amazing just to be able to, and certainly when I say to be able to go around, I don't mean as if you're some, special being going around, but it's like to move through life feeling that way yourself and being able to have other people feel it too is a real gift, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like if you want love, be love. If you want kindness, be kind. And that was
Yes.
actually, you had shared a post the other day, and I screenshot it because this is what I think is like a really good encompassing statement or sentiment about you. And this was by Case. Kenny. I'll put this in the show notes. But it was a post that said, "Life is better when you surround yourself with people whose kindness isn't a strategy, it's a way of life." And I think you embody that. And I know
Mm.
we've only interacted very minimally, but it was just even the fact that you said yes. In our interactions, you were very kind, very generous. And when I asked you, is there any projects that you're working on right now that you want to share, that you want to talk about, any products? You're like, nope, I will talk about whatever I can talk about, whatever you'd like. You have a new book coming out this summer. And so you could have very easily been like, yep, let's talk about my new book, but you didn't. And I think that's just because you genuinely are a kind human being and probably know that because you are, that's what comes back to you also.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. And yeah, what's interesting is I don't even think about it in terms of that's what comes back to me. Um, I mean, ultimately, this all goes to, and I'll dig into this or drill down on it in just one second. It goes down back to perspective. But like, I have always been of the mind that I just do the best like work that I can. And that can be in back in the day when I used to produce music or in writing or in social media or in podcasting or just in being a person. I'm just always trying to do that the best I can. Or should I say the most like genuine and useful way that I can. And I know that if I can just be like kind of irrefutable in that way of honoring my true self, like who I want to be in the world, that good shit will just happen around because you're being that person in the world. It's like, yeah, you make good stuff. It doesn't matter how you don't need to strategize. Like the Beatles didn't need to strategize having best-selling albums. Like they just made great albums in the day and they became great because they were great. You didn't have to do a bunch of stuff around it to set it up to be great. And I think about stuff in the same way, where it's like just be that way and everything will be fine. you know and it seems to work out. And from not to go into a rabbit hole, but I think that I am always thinking about the biggest picture view of things, and also sort of the micro and the macro at the same time. And so I know that like just coming on to a podcast and having a good conversation, I know that people that hear it, it will either at the very least, hopefully it'll entertain them. You know, outside of that, maybe they'll feel kind of warm and fuzzy and anchored by the conversation. They'll have an emotional sort of hit from it. And maybe if we get really lucky, they'll take away a couple of insights that will then be useful for them in their life. And it's like, that's what matters to me. And that's the big picture. So it's not about a product. It's not about networking. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about just showing up because you understand in the grand scheme of things that we are all of this giant interconnected web of awareness. And the more good things you can do to, add to that, the better.
Yeah. I love what you were talking about, just like showing up being authentically and genuinely you, right? And that's I think a hard thing, especially for people. I'm very open about being in recovery from narcissist abuse. And so that's something that's really hard to get to that place. And I've worked really hard at it myself because because I grew up with that, that's then what I surrounded myself with as the closest people in my life. And it was like, well, you should wear this, you should buy this house, you should buy this car, that's the kind of car you should drive, this is the kind of job you should do, this is how you should look, this is how you should be, this is, and so you have to do a lot of hard work on that self-discovery and self-love journey so that you can get to know who you are and then be who you are authentically and genuinely. So, do you have any tips for people on that to shut out the noise, especially because there is so much pressure in social media, the comparisons and, people putting out only the highlight reel of, living their best lives. Like, how do we shut that noise out and get to that point of not seeking that external validation and being authentically and genuinely you?
I'll give you just an honest answer. I would say really acknowledge the fact that you're going to die. None of this shit matters. None of this nonsense matters. Let go of all of that worry. Stop caring. Just stop caring and just be yourself. do what feels right to you and be who you are. Don't try and be who you think other people want you to be. Stop giving a fuck otherwise. And if anyone has a problem with it, then that's their problem. It's not yours. And as long as you just like, hey, I mean, like, I'm sure not everyone likes me, but I don't mind. Like, I don't like everyone. It doesn't really matter. It's just about like, as long as I always know that I'm doing what's right by me, then I'm good. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's you just focus on like your integrity. And I think that's probably to ground it in something like less silly. I would say that like integrity of self is really where that comes from for me because I never, ever, it's just not, it's a non negotiable. Anything that doesn't like feel right to me, I don't do. Anything I know that would be damaging to myself, to my relationships, to other people, I don't do. Any like you have that voice that arises in your head, that suggests certain things, and it's just like, no, not gonna do it. And I think living in integrity with yourself and just like hashtag doing what's right all the time is it's very freeing. It's very freeing because you just follow your own code and don't ever kind of betray that notion of like quote unquote goodness within yourself. Um, and then you're liberated, right?
Yeah. It's interesting for me because I did do some house cleaning in my community, kind of on my journey, and starting to say no to things that I wasn't comfortable with, it did weed some people out. And I think
Yeah.
that's okay because that means that they were wanting you to be a version of you that wasn't really truly you. And so I think that kind of helps you surround yourself with the people that are for you. And it's okay. I mean, I know not everybody likes me. I look at the reviews. Um and that's okay. Like not everybody's for everybody. Um
Negative reviews are good, by the way. That's the
I
way I
know.
look at it.
Well,
That
they're spending time, and that's what they don't realize. It's the same few people that I had to clean out. And they're the first ones to make a comment. And I'm like, oh, you don't realize that you're spending time on my platform. Thank you. You're actually helping me. I appreciate it.
yeah.
Um, so intuition is such like I love this topic because I'm a very intuitive person. But for a lot of my life, I ignored it and I shut it off. And I'll never do that again. Like ignore I think once you ignore your intuition for especially if it's something really big that makes a really big negative impact on your life in the moment, but I have turned mine into a positive, you never ignore it again. So how did you start really tapping into your intuition and letting that guide you?
Yeah, I think again it goes back to, whenever I was a kid of like having to learn to really listen to what felt right in various situations. And and I think it probably wasn't until I was in my early 30s where I really began to be able to hear that voice with enough clarity to make the type of difference that I wanted. Um, but I would say that to put it in useful terms for someone that's listening, you know, start paying attention to in various situations the material that arises in your mind whenever you are thinking about something, whenever you are in a position where you'd be responding to something. Pay attention to the arising thought and emotion, and then just sort of watch what your mind does. Notice how you'll have a thought about something and you'll have a feeling about something, but then other thoughts and feelings will come and surround those things, trying to kind of quote unquote rationalize or put them into reasonable terms or whatever. I would say that just taking a snapshot of that initial feeling and initial thought you have is really valuable. There's a Chögyam Trungpa, who is a Rinpoche, who was a Buddhist, a Tibetan Buddhist teacher. Um, he had a great saying, first thought, best thought, which not
Mm.
necessarily true, but in terms of like what your instinct is, what your gut is telling you, can be a really valuable thing to remember. Because we'll generally have our intuitive feeling about something, and the second we start thinking about it, it changes, because a feeling and a thought are two different things. A feeling has much more information than a thought does. Like thoughts and people that are disconnected from their emotions become very cerebral, speaking from experience, because and you become disconnected from your emotions out of need to protect yourself. And so in the world of ideas, ideas are, modular, like binary black and white pieces of data. It's words, it's concepts, it's logic, it's all concrete. So therefore it's controllable. And that's why people who are have trouble being emotional are very into their heads. It's because it's like, yes, this is the playground that is quantifiable, that I can be comfortable in and feel safe in. But an emotion, on the other hand, is symbolic. It's not literal information. And so, it's open to interpretation, it's deep, it's rich, it's infinite because we can feel into something forever and until we basically get tired of it. Um, and so whenever we have an emotion about something, my phone is apparently not a fan of what I was just talking about. It just committed suicide. Um, it was like logic is God, and it jumped off. I think AI is becoming sentient over here.
Mm.
But anyway, so yeah, so whenever an emotion arises, um, what happens is that we then start trying to think about what that is, and it pushes the depth of that intuitive, feeling through the filter of the shape of our intellect, and therefore it becomes something different. It changes. So, and it's a very long-winded way to say everyone can wake up now after the nap. It's a long-winded way to say that whenever you're in a moment and just in general life, like pay a lot of attention to that first feeling that you feel about something and just start allowing that to guide you, and after you pay more attention to it, what you'll begin to observe is that there is this kind of magnetic feeling in life where you will feel like you're being drawn towards certain things versus kind of pushing yourself towards certain things. And I think that's kind of like the warrior two pose you were talking
Mm.
about. And you'll learn to follow what you're being drawn towards and what feels right, as opposed to the things that make you feel tight and second guessy and things like that. How do you tap into your intuition and stay connected to it?
So I'm a really big fan of cognitive diffusion, which I didn't used to be an emotional person either. That was something that I turned on in my late 30s and because of what I went through, but really tapping into, and you talk a lot about this as well, the mind body connection, how connected they really are. And I think people think they're very disconnected, right? We focus so much on feeding our bodies and working out and exercising, but we don't pay as much attention to like feeding our minds and how connected they are and our emotions. So I always say that our thoughts create our feelings shape our mood, and our mood becomes our reality.
Mm.
And so it's really paying attention to what we're telling ourselves. We have to be kind to ourselves. And I know you referenced this in Now is the Way. Also, I talk about how many thoughts we have a day. I think it's increased. I use Mayo Clinic as the barometer. They say about up to 60,000 thoughts a day.
Mhm.
Your book says about 40,000, but up to 80% of our thoughts are negative or can be negative. And
Mhm.
so I'm really passionate about flipping that script. So paying attention to, like you said, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and not necessarily ignoring it, but letting it come in, paying attention to it, letting it go if you don't want to feel that way. That's the cognitive diffusion, actually feeling it and then putting intention on how you want to feel. For me, my intuition actually comes over me physically. So, for example, when I knew something was wrong in my relationship that I write about in my first book, You're My Favorite, I was sitting on the edge of a bed in Orlando, Florida, and it literally felt like a wave came crashing over my body. I got shingles on my face the next day.
Mm,
My body was so stressed, or my I was so stressed that it manifested into a neurological skin issue, on my face. I have a scar. You can't see it on the camera, but I have a scar that is a good reminder for me to kind of always tap into that. So it's like I think oftentimes our bodies tell us things. So I know another thing is like that feeling of butterflies in our stomach. I know like fairy tales and Disney tell us that's a really good thing. But I had that feeling and I don't think it was a good thing. I think it was a warning sign that my body was telling me. And there it's kind of divided in the world of psychology. But yeah, I really pay attention and I get like not to get too woo-woo crazy because that might turn some people off, but I get a tingly, numb feeling, particularly in my right hand.
mm.
And that is when I feel like I know something is true.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I mean, the world's a weird place. So it's whatever works for you. I think keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, cognitive diffusion, that sounds like a great scent diffuser for I'd like for my living room. Like, what does that smell? That's cognitive diffusion.
I love it. Oh my gosh, we just came up with a new you did. You just came up with a new brand idea, a
Yeah,
new
that's
brand deal.
right.
I love it. Cory Allen cognitive diffusion candle or
Yeah, smell your
diffuser scent.
thoughts. Yeah.
Smell your thoughts. That's hilarious. Well, you do have some of the funniest, like best metaphors. So in one of your podcasts recently that I was listening to, and this goes back to kind of that concept that we were talking about before of that like comparison and people just wanting more, more, more. And it ties back to being in the present because I used to really surround myself with people like this. You use the metaphor of like when you're building a house and the house is done, you don't keep building, right? You stop and you live in it. But I know so many people like they get a new job or they get a promotion. It's like, well, what's the next job? What's the next promotion? Or I bought this house. Now what's the next house? Or I got this car. What's the next car? And it really does take away from the joy of being present and being in the moment and actually enjoying where you are right now.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's thank you for the metaphor thing. That is it's been a blessing and a curse in my life. um, but it can be useful for sure. Um, I actually in life I tend to use those kind of abstract analogies or metaphors. One, because they simply make me happy. They bring me joy to say and to think of. But also because they're such a great tool. I retrofitted this, by the way. Um, they started off as kind of a defense mechanism, whenever I was a kid, of course.
Mhm.
But as I got older, I realized they're a great way to like break the tension or also to like break people out of the surface level, just kind of bullshit, uncomfortable, like, because I hate small talk. One reason is I'm not good at it. But another reason is because it's not real. There's no connection happening in small talk. I want to get to something. Let's get to a real conversation with like you and I. We hopped on Zoom and in 2 minutes we're talking about like narcissistic parents. And we're better for it. And so if you can give a entertaining analogy like that, it gets people actually thinking instead of just being on autopilot on tape recorder mode of just kind of parroting whatever. It's like, come on, let's get present. Let's actually connect and get our brains going here. Um, but yeah, so it's funny that you bring that up. I actually was just thinking about this today, and I was recording a Patreon podcast about this very topic. And you know, one of those things that can happen that I've found happen in my own life that I think is interesting is we start doing things like you're talking about, you build the house and you like keep looking for more, you're looking for more. Um, is that like once you start doing things in your life that like help you grow or that keep you happy or that like push things forward for you. So that can be exercise, it can be meditation, it can be diet, it can be just kind of the way you carry yourself in the world. It can be a writing, a journaling practice, podcasting, whatever it is. And at the beginning, it's really exciting because it's new and it's like providing you with a new positive element to your life. And then you keep doing it because it's keeping your life at this sea level of positivity and enjoyment and just general sort of well being. But then over a period of time, that becomes really familiar and it becomes just another kind of clinical process of your daily life. And therefore, it loses the energy of excitement and kind of abundance and magic that it had at the beginning. So I'm sure we can all relate to that, certainly. And so, uh, that typically people will be doing something that they enjoy or that is good for their lives, but then they'll go look for something else because they're like, well, this isn't like entertaining me the same way that it did at the beginning. Which is, of course, just like, starting the cycle of desire over or can be in some ways. But so to me, like one of the things that I think about with stuff like that is just like remembering to look for the fun like, like where's the wonder? Where's the fun? Where's the joy in the things that we do in life that are sort of static, good things for our well-being that we tend to forget that we should be looking at them in that way because we've become familiar with them. So just kind of like looking for the wow in things, looking for how you can, do things a little bit differently to find that fun and rediscover and breathe the life back into them, I think is really valuable.
Being curious is such an asset, like, always being curious, seeking the next thing. There's so many other topics that I wanted to pull from your current book, Now is the Way. Like, you talk about curiosity, meditation, and not overthinking it. I am such an advocate for meditation, and I did, like I said, one of yours earlier today, and interestingly enough, it was like the first one that popped up on YouTube when I pulled it up, and it was from March of 2020, like literally a week or 10 days before the world shut down.
Oh, wow.
That also was weird because that was one of the things that I was thinking about because your Now is the Way, your first book came out in September of 2019.
Hmm.
And I mean, the timing, I mean, nothing happens by chance, but it's like, I think people need this stuff now more than ever. And so I'm so glad that that did get put out into the world, especially when it did. Because like I said, I think that people need mindfulness, meditation, that being present, now more than ever, maybe even before 2019.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your upcoming book?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It is, I guess I won't say the title yet, but it's essentially, um, has to deal with a lot of what we're talking about now. It's, you know, I have experienced something powerful and one of the things that I paid close attention to, and it's kind of the way that I research this next book is by observing, or back to Sherlock Holmesing again, observing what are the common things that people say to me through social media? How do they respond to things I put out there? What do people say about my podcast? And I just get, thousands and thousands of comments and DMs and I see them. And like you said, like how I liked your DM, like I always try to at least do like a reaction to them just to let people know that I'm there and I'm seeing what they're responding to me with. But I also pay attention to patterns and to similarities because I want to understand, like outside of my own bias, what is it that not what I need or what I think people need, but what is it that people are actually asking for? Or what are they saying, the real sticking point of problem that they're facing? And I think the biggest thing that I notice from a kind of universal point of view is that people um they don't know how and don't believe that they can change their life in a way that they're imagining as possible because they've become used to their lives as they are now, like they're used to what's normal, and they think because that's what they're used to, that that's all that they'll be able to experience. So if they see themselves as like, I want to be this famous podcaster or whatever, they're like, that would be cool, but like, this is what I am, this is what my life is like, and that's not really possible for me. But the reality is, like, how did people that became huge podcasters do that? They were just in the same position, but they were able to get to where they are. And how did they do that, right?
By inviting really cool guests like Cory Allen.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and thank you. So I walk someone through, how do you recognize that you want to make changes and take charge of your life? Then first step is taking charge of your mindset and becoming aware of the thinking programs and patterns that are holding you back, and how you can use those and change them to empower you and to build self-confidence. And then I move into, self-trust, and then I go deeply into how to listen, how to hear your own voice and begin to trust that, and then face your future with confidence. So it's very much all the stuff we've been talking about so far. It's just this guidebook to starting from where you are now, getting in your mind, changing your mindset, and being able to hear your voice, and then just, you know, start making that you thought was impossible possible.
That is so cool. I mean, I this is so up my alley. I this kind of ties everything back together. So in November of 2019, I went on a meditation retreat for a week in Mexico, even though I had never meditated for a single second in my life.
Mm,
I'm very passionate about the words that we use and what we tell ourselves. So even just how you were telling that story of someone that's like, well, this is who I am, this is how I am, this is my life. Intentions and how we frame them make such an impact. So I was still working in corporate America. I was actually just about to start a new job. But one of the intentions that I wrote, so I'm very big on when you use the words I am, or when you write an intention or you think about what you want your future to look like, you should frame it with the words like I am,
mhm.
because you need to start living as though you're already that.
Yes.
So for me, I wrote an intention in November of 2019 that said, I am a best-selling published author, an internationally renowned speaker, positively impacting and empowering others. I have a number one best-selling book. I'm a speaker. And that's the feedback that I get from the work that I do now. And I didn't have podcasting on there, but
Mhm.
we can change that. But I think that's so powerful, and I'm really happy to hear that you're putting something into the world to give people the framework on how to take things from, point A where they're at now to that next level.
Yeah, and congratulations on just identifying what it was that you wanted to do and actually doing it. And that's such a huge part of it, is just gaining clarity on, what you actually want to do. And it's something that I try and before I proceed, I was kind of laughing because, are you familiar with Nasir Gatata Maharaj, who's like Indian sage that wrote one of the best books? And I wouldn't say people should go out and buy it because it's kind of dense, but it's called I Am That. Um, and he's sort of talking about what you're talking about, but from a very uh, spiritual point of view as opposed to a material one. So
Mm,
I just like that you were using the exact same language, talking about something different. It was cool. It's like a little cosmic peekaboo, as they say.
yeah.
Uh,
Synchronicity.
yeah. Um, anyway, yeah, it's kind of one of the things I try and, I focus on mental clarity a lot, and particularly in my newsletter and with my stuff on social media, because it's really the foundation of everything, of all of this stuff, no matter what it is that you want to do, where you want to go. If you don't have the right self understanding, then you're sort of driving blind, right? And this idea of, to become whatever you want to become, whatever you want to achieve in your life. Something I have discovered time and time again with other people and in the past myself is a lack of precision and clarity on what it truly is that they want to do, right? And having a feeling is great, but it's not a target. It's not a destination. People will be like, for example, like someone could be like, I want to be a successful author. It's like, wonderful. So how are you going to do that? What are you going to write about? How are you going to learn to write in a way that will service that? Like, what will the premise of that book be? And they're like, well, I haven't thought of any of that, but for the last 2 years, I've been beating myself up because I've been saying I want to be a writer. It's like, well, that's why you haven't been able to get there. It's because you're just going around with this feeling of like, I want this thing, but you haven't shaved it down, defined, and made it precise so that you actually have a goal to start working towards. And that's great. I bring that up because it's an important thing that people can do for themselves. It also can be a self manipulation, sort of self bypassing tool as well. People can go, I want to be a successful writer. And then they were just like, but that's what I want, but it's just not happening for me, da 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 da, and then I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. So you can use it as sort of like one of those things as well, sort of telling yourself the story of like the cosmos is working against me. So it's not me, it's the fact that I'm not finding my way because of that. Um, but in terms of what you did, defining clearly what your goals are and then just simply start working towards them. I mean, that's how anything gets done. That's why you're able to do it. I mean, other than your skills and your talent and your expertise and your drive and grit and all of those things are necessary for it too. But just being able to really define what it is so important. So it's beautiful to hear you lay that out, how you did that and they were able to achieve those things.
Well, and I think people think intentions or affirmations are silly because they think they're just a hope or a wish or a dream. But you actually have to take action. Like, I wouldn't be an author if I didn't write the book. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be a speaker if I didn't take the steps to doing that, right? You have to take action. And I think for me, it was one of those things where like my soul knew this is what I was supposed to be doing before my mind caught up. And I think
Mhm.
that was the switch of then starting to take action and putting everything into motion to actually do it.
Yeah, beautiful. So what you did was you put your mind in service of your intuition, and that's the way that it should go. People get that flipped around sometimes, but you have the feeling, and then you, instead of trying to put your the other way around, where you're like, I'll do this so that I can feel this way. And it's like, no, you feel this way, and then you go do this, the thing, and that's how you can really make something real because it's something because then you have the like unlimited energy necessary to do things like that or the actually my new book I Bertrand Russell, a philosopher from like the early 1900s, amazing polymath guy. He used the term zest, which is what he calls like the
Mm.
energy of life. um and I talk about this in there as well, but he describes soaking the appetite for possible things, which that phrase has been on my mind for like 20 years, always ever since I first read about it. Maintaining that, the appetite for possible things. Um, but it's so true because you need that energy, the thing you can't not do, and so the only way to be able to be successful in something and the only way to do that is for it to be an organic thing that arises within you. And then turning that, honoring what you're feeling, what you're driven to do without any effort and then putting the mind in service of that is a way to the only way I can really see to be really successful at something because you need that intrinsic motivation that is sort of out of your hands. Like I used to describe it like just feel like my skeleton was possessed, but the meat on my body was mine. It's like the skeleton just doing this thing, and like the rest of me is just along for the ride. Like it's got to happen. And you mentioned like some kind of people think that affirmations or something like that may be a bit woo, and they can be depending on how they're framed and who is saying them. But who's less woo than Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? That dude is, we all know him. He's built out of muscle. He's very direct, objective, highly disciplined, highly focused. He's maybe accomplished more than, I mean, I don't know who else has accomplished more in a lifetime. Yeah, the guy's lived three full lifetimes. And Netflix put out a documentary about him recently, and one of the things he talked about is like, this world, but in case anyone's not familiar and hasn't heard of Arnold Schwarzenegger, this, the biggest bodybuilder in the world, brought, fitness to the forefront of America, became the biggest movie star of the world, and then became a politician. And he described in there of like how each step along the way of his journey, that the most important thing to him was gaining immense mental clarity and visual clarity of what his goal was.
Mm.
And he knew that the second that he could not only just know what it was he wanted to, but he could see it in his mind, just like it was a movie, then he was like, I know that's the next target. And once he had that clarity, then he's like, then you just start going, where you're going, where it's going to be, and just in case anyone's feeling like visualizing the future that you desire with immense clarity is somehow metaphysical, know that, Arnold does the same thing.
Well, yeah, and you talk about this in Now is the Way. It's like if there's I forget what the philosopher was or who it was that said it. It was a quote that you used where it's like the best way to get from the start of 1,000-step journey is to take the first step
Oh yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
take the next step, right? And I actually, my second book is a guided journal. It's called I'm My Favorite, a guided journal for your path forward. So I use a lot of that same sort of visualization of like walking your path. And what you were talking about just a minute ago of doing what you're meant to be doing, like some people call it your purpose, your dharma, whatever. I recently, because I'm a Pisces, so in true Pisces
Hey,
form,
me
are you a
too.
Pisces too?
Yeah.
When's your
Yep.
birthday? It's coming up.
Tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
That's so exciting. Oh my gosh. Mine's March 18th. So
All right.
I'm on the other end of the spectrum, but I say to me, like, not doing what I do now would be like trying to swim without water.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And, okay, so I'm curious what you think about this. It's easy to talk about those feelings and approaching life in those ways once you have oriented yourself towards your purpose. I know for a fact that the majority of people don't know what their purpose is and they can't find it. I think that I certainly am surrounded, all of my friends, all of my acquaintances, everyone, they're all high performing, highly driven people with clear purpose that are, doing great things. So it's easy to me to forget that that's not normal. Ultimately, it's not standard. I know a lot of people struggle with that. How do you suggest someone tap into and figure out what it is that they want to do and discover their purpose?
I think you have to get to know yourself. I think it all starts with getting to know yourself, spending time with yourself. I'm kind of on this big kick right now. I took my first solo vacation
Amazing.
and it was amazing. I think that you really tap into your senses, doing things on your own. Simple things like in your book, talking about sitting and having a cup of coffee. Go somewhere and have a cup of coffee by yourself. Order what you want. Do things that bring you joy. And you have to try new things. Like get curious, try different things, see what you like, see what you don't, and really pay attention to that. I do think that tapping into meditation is a really great way to start to get to know and understand yourself. And then paying attention to your feelings. I think so many people are crippled by low vibration feelings like fear. So when I do workshops with my guided journal, that's one of the things that comes up all of the time where people will start crying and they're like, I don't know the last time I felt joy,
Hmm.
or I have been making all of the decisions in my life the past year out of fear. And so it starts with that self-awareness. and
I
really getting
think I
to
totally agree.
know, yeah,
Yeah,
yourself.
totally agree. Yeah, and meditation is so valuable, not just because it, people think of it in sort of a um characterized way or almost a cartoony way where they're like, "Oh, you'll become peaceful and relaxed." It's like eventually that that can be an outcome, but ultimately what's going to happen is you become more familiar with your inner life. You become more aware of what you're thinking and feeling in every, moment of the day, and therefore by increasing that sense of self-awareness, you are then able to tell what things actually do give you that positive feeling, because
Mhm.
you're there for, you can see like, oh, this is new, this is something, nuanced and different than what I'm used to. Interesting. You can sort of really tell that, and it's a really very valuable, one of the many benefits of meditation.
I have become a lot more patient, but I think we live in this world of instant gratification, right? Like everyone expects everything to be like Amazon Prime. But you don't meditate and then 2 days later you're all of a sudden this calm, patient person, right? Like
Right.
that pops up on your doorstep. It does take time. You have to cultivate it. Your mind is a muscle. You have to practice it. That's why it's called a meditation practice. And
Hmm.
it's like you don't go to the gym one time and then expect to lose 20 pounds. It's this. I love how you talk about it in the book. So I'm going to link all of your stuff. I'll link your website, your podcast, your newsletter, your book, so that people can go learn more about you, meditate with you, your Patreon. I'll put everything in here so that they can learn more. But I love how you talk about meditation because I was like, I'm not going on a meditation retreat. That sounds stupid. You can all take your cute little pillows and go do that because so many people have misperceptions about what meditation is and what it isn't. And you do such a beautiful job of explaining it and making sure that people know that when you try it, you're not doing anything wrong.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's no, it's like telling someone, what's the right way to eat or something like that. It's like, I mean, just however
Well,
you do it, hold your fork.
with your mouth closed.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
misophonia, so with your mouth closed.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. I'd like to talk. Yeah. So where else does that really get to you?
Um, the repetitive sounds, it's usually mostly chewing, but things that are really repetitive. So someone like clicking a pen
Hmm.
nonstop,
Hmm.
kicking the back of your seat on an airplane nonstop, um, sniffling,
Ah,
like
okay.
the repeat sniff,
Interesting.
sniff, sniff, sniff.
Silverware on a plate in a restaurant, does that one get you?
Not as much because there's usually enough sound. Oh, but like tap, 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 tap in the bottom of a yogurt container. Scoop, scoop, scoop,
Oh,
scoop,
okay.
scoop, scoop to get the laugh.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh at your pain, but
No, I laugh at it. Like seriously, I do laugh at it because I'm hyper aware of it. I think I'm a highly sensitive person. Misophonia is a like key indicator to that
yeah.
personality type. I am very all of my senses are very sensitive. Crowds are a struggle for me. Like the Minnesota State Fair, like living in
Mhm.
Minneapolis, forget about it. Anyway, so I digress. So I know you said you're not doing it wrong with meditation. There's no right way to eat. And I joked that with your mouth closed is the right way to
Yeah.
eat.
No, I love it. I'm fascinated by sound. So that was
Mm.
I'd like to hear how sounds treat you, in various ways.
I love a lot of sound. I love music. And I think that's the interesting thing. Like, and I listened to one of your binaural beats. And I think that's really cool work that you do. Like a sound bath. Amazing. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what the binaural beats reminded me of a little bit was being in a sound bath.
Oh, it's definitely a sound bath for the brain instead of the
Yeah.
body. Unless you played them on a loud playback system, and then yeah, same thing happening essentially. Um, but yeah, no, back to meditate. There is no wrong way to meditate. Yeah, and there is no there's just, like I say in my first book, it's like there's just a way that works for you. I mean, it's your practice. It's like if you're in the gym, there's not a right way to exercise. It's like do the things, find a process that works for you and that does what you're trying to get out of it, and then you're good.
Yeah. Try different ones. Be curious, right? Like try different
Yes,
things, find out what works for you because there are so many different types. I'm a nighttime
totally.
meditator. I like to meditate before I go to bed because I do tend to fall asleep. I think I'm a person that takes in what I need and then I kind of check out. And so it's
Amazing.
perfect for me to do before bed. I happened to do one of yours earlier today. Highly recommend because your voice, as we've discovered here during our chat. But yeah, well, Cory, I literally could talk to you for days, but any final things that you wanna leave us with today?
No. No,
Perfect.
other than thank you for inviting me on the podcast. I had a great time speaking with you. It was a lot of fun, and thank you for doing all the work you're doing in the world, and just trying to help other people by sharing your experiences and your expertise. It's a beautiful thing and a great gift for all.
Thank you. See, that kindness, circle back. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.